Friends, Romans, countrymen, no, friends, guests, and those who have joined us today via Zoom, welcome to the September 16th meeting of the Rotary Club of Louisville. I'm Jean West, owner and producer, Phrases West Productions, and president of the club. The provider indication is Steve Jester, pastor and head staff at Second Presbyterian Church, and Paul Harris Fellow.
Thank you, President Jean, and let's pray. Good and gracious God, we're thankful for the gift of life itself. And in this setting, we are mindful and thankful for the beauty of your world, your creation. We come before you this day grateful for the abundance and richness of your earth, the food we enjoy, and grateful for those who serve it. We give thanks for the privilege of service, the call to be those who minister to others, who work for the healing and the reconciliation of this world. Give us wisdom as we do that. Give us good fellowship this day. Strengthen us in spirit by our time together, and challenge us and encourage us through words spoken, touch, hugs, and all the things that we take for granted now. And we're so grateful for. All this we ask and give thanks in your holy name.
Thank you, Steve. And to lead us in the pledge and forward test is Tom Crimmins, president of Friend of Mid-America, member of the 1912 Society, a Paul Harris Fellow ×3, and the sustaining member.
Please join me in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now join me in the four-way test of the things we think, say, and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you, Tom. Rotarians, you may be seated. It is always our pleasure to welcome our guests. Rotarians, please take this time to introduce yourself alike first, then your guest. And guests, please stand to be recognized when your name is called.
Kevin Lynch, Joseph, I think it's like that, and after that was after they are refusing to introduce the guests, will be a better issue.
What? Can you repeat that? Your mic was off.
After this week, I'm refusing to introduce you as a guest, because you'll be a member next week.
Oh, my God. Any more guests, Celine or Celine? Do you have guests?
My in-person guests are not here yet, but I believe we have on the Zoom call the producer of the documentary that is being made about Captain Lepley, Darren Stewart with Stewart Media Management. Sorry, I was trying to look it up, but I can't get on my phone. He is actually in Spain, joining us from Spain, I believe, and the documentary is called In Transit, the Kelly Lepley story. So you'll be hearing more about that later. But if he's on the call, hi Darren, and thank you for joining us today. And I think we may also have some people from the UPS Public Relations team joining us via Zoom. So welcome everybody.
Yes, welcome very much, all of you, and you will be hearing more about Kelly's exciting story during her presentation. So guests, if you'd like to learn more about our club, please stay after the meeting for a brief What is Rotary session with Craig Sherman. Is Craig here? Is Craig doing What is Rotary today? Or is it you, Jay? Okay, great. All right. It's time for a little Cajun culture fun. Here's your question for today. Who was the well-known safety engineer from Louisiana who later became a stand-up comedian and a Cajun folklore author? I don't know. It was also had a cooking show. What? Who? No, not Paul Prudhomme. Justin Wilshire. Who said that? Very good. I y'all and I guarantee. All right, to introduce today's guest speaker is Erica Fields. Erica is president and owner of Brooks Grain LLC and a Paul Harris Fellow Times 6. Erica.
Thank you, Dean. Well, before I read Kelly's bio, I just wanted to say that Kelly and I have known each other for over 10 years. We both kind of went through the same journey at separate times, or at the same time in separate cities, and we're connected through a online group of transgender people, and we all connected. And because at the time I was doing business in Louisville, I would get down here and we started meeting for coffee and getting to know each other. And I followed her journeys on Facebook for these last 10, 12 years. So I'm so excited to be able to introduce her. Captain Kelly Lepley is a captain on the B-747, flying the world's largest package delivery company, flying for the largest package delivery company. Her career spans over 30 years, flying planes as small as a single-engine Cessna to one of the largest cargo aircraft transiting the skies. At the expense of her private life, she excelled in her professional career. That success would not compensate for the pain she had masqueraded. No one knew the extent of it. She hid it for nearly 40 years. This all came crashing down in July of 2009 when she sought help for the internal battles she was fighting. She would go on to lose her home, marriage, retirement, and many of her church friends. The world she once knew was no longer there. Coming to terms with this new reality deepened her faith, softened her heart, and motivated her to speak out on living an authentic life. Her love for others, especially the marginalized in society, comes from her journey. She has walked in their shoes and experienced their pain. Knowing the struggle and facing societal obstacles, she has made it a life commitment to inspire others through her motivational talks on the importance of living an authentic life. Her story has touched the lives of many through her talk at TED. Since then, she has gone on to speak before audiences throughout North America to include Delta Airlines, UPS, University of Alaska, University of Louisville, Dayspring United Methodist Church in Tempe, Arizona, Out and Equal Atlanta, Workplace Leadership Forum, the Tom Joyner Radio Show in Toronto, Canada, the Bank of Montreal podcast, along with Pentagon's Defense Digital Service. So would you help me in welcoming Kelly here? And
thank you, Erica, for that warm introduction. And thank you all for allowing me to come and share my story today. It's has this last 2 years not been a challenge? The last set of speeches I've done have been via Zoom. And I don't know about you, or every time I get on Zoom, something happens that goes wrong. Either the internet goes out, or my microphone doesn't work, or the lighting doesn't look right. There's always something that goes on. So the opportunity to come and to see live faces, to see your beautiful faces, and to talk a little bit about the challenges of my life, I am just so thrilled and so honored. And so thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I was thinking back, when it came to the human touch, back to when my daughter was in the NICU unit about 20 years ago, and when she was having a hard time breathing. one of the things that the doctors had us do was take her shirt off and put it inside, and put her inside our blouse. And one of the things that was really cool to watch was her blood content level, her oxygen level would increase from 80 to 85% to 90 to 100%. And I asked the doctor, why was her oxygen level increasing? And he said, because she's feeling all your energy. Our blood, our bodies are filled with hemoglobin, and we have positive and negative energy, and when we touch each other, we have the ability to energize one another. And I thought, what a gift that is. And then over the last 2 years, it's been kind of a challenge not to have that human touch. And I will never, ever take that for granted after these last 2 years. So thank you for allowing me to come and share a little bit of my story. As I was thinking about what I wanted to say, I thought, I wanted just to encapsulate everything, not just on my life, but on your life, and then one life. And so I titled the story originally One Life, but now I changed it to My Life, Your Life, One Life. And if you would just take a moment and think back, because this is a time before Adam and Eve, and you think about all the decisions that took place from that point forward until the time you were born. Everything had to fall into place for each one of us to be brought into this world. And then you think about, as we began to grow in age, we started making decisions that would affect our life, like where would we go to college? Who would we marry? How many children would we have? Where would we live? All of those decisions are key decisions that make up who we are. It's part of our identity. It's part of our story. And that is one of the things that I began to look at as I was going through my journey. It's not just about me, it's about you, and about all of us coming together in one life. I'm going to try and play with this thing, so forgive me if I screw it up. Turn it on. Step one. Turn it on. If you were to encapsulate my life story, it would be this. It's found in the book of Romans, and it says, we rejoice in our sufferings because sufferings produces perseverance, perseverance character, character hope. And hope doesn't disappoint us. And that has been the life scripture in my life over the last 30-some years. I received that from a friend of mine when I went through my first divorce. And I began to look at life in different avenues. Like, okay, maybe there's challenges in my life for a reason. How can I learn from those challenges in order to become a better person? And so that was one of the things that I started to gravitate throughout my life as I would go through the challenges that I would be faced with. If you were to look at me early on, though, I was a dreamer. And this is actually from a meme, and I just kind of plastered it there because it's really my life, because I was the type of person as a child that would look out the window and I would stare for hours and dream. All I wanted to do was be a pilot. I wanted to fly airplanes. And so I would just do that. And my teacher would always say, you can't make it money just looking out the window. I sure was wrong. And so it's been a great, great career, but without a dream, I had no ability to go to where I wanted to go. But anyways, I started out with that dream, and it started with the age of 2. The picture on the left-hand side was actually the first airplane that I ever received. And I know I'm dating myself, but I'm sure you all can relate to this. We didn't have Google, we didn't have the computers, we didn't have the internet back in the 70s. But what we did have is the Sears Roebuck catalog. And I always look forward to September because that's when you get the catalog and you kind of start piecing through and see what you wanted. And it's like, I always picked out all the airplanes. And at the age of 2, that's the airplane that I picked up, and that's what I wanted to fly. And so my mom pointed out the other picture, said, no, I want that one. I knew what I wanted early on, and from that point forward, that's where it went. And so I would take this airplane, and I would just take off from my mom's kitchen table, we fly around the living room, and then we lay it down on the kitchen table. My poor mom, she had to work to cook, but that was kind of how my life was. I just wanted to fly airplane. So I was a dreamer. I knew what I wanted early on. At the age of 16, my dad took me to a local community college in northern Michigan, because all I talked about. Even on our vacation, we go to the airport, watch airplanes take off the land for hours. My dad bored, but he would stay there and watch me look at these airplanes. But over time, he said, I think he knew that I wanted to fly. And so he took me to this local community college. I learned how to fly. So at 16, I started flying. 17, I soloed. I got my pilot's license. By the time I was 20, I was teaching students how to fly. And by the time I was 21, I was flying for an airline called Xantop, had a four-engine turboprop. We were flying over the United States, and it was a cool gig during that period. It was during Gulf War I, and we were carrying military hardware into Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma City. And from there, that freight would then be shipped over to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, in preparation for Gulf War I. So that's how I got my aviation start early on. And then I just progressed from that point forward. I flew for a commuter airline, flying for a small turboprop with 19 seaters, with airplanes that you all hated to fly on. Didn't have any bathrooms on them, but I made a really good pilot. And then from there, I flew for a company called Airborne Express. I did that for 6 years, and then came on with UPS in 2001, just before 9/11. As I progressed in my life and my career, though I had reached the pinnacle of my life, I knew where I was, where I wanted to be, and I would achieve that. And from the outside world looking in, you would have thought I had everything in my life. I had a beautiful home, I had a great job, I achieved my goal of becoming an airline pilot. I had an orphanage in India, started out with 6 kids, we ended up with 50 before I had to leave. And I was in part of the adoption ministry here at 2 of the local churches here in Louisville, helped develop the ministry to facilitate adoption of young children. But there was something inside me that I was just dying. I was dying inside. I didn't know how to deal with it. I grew up in a Christian home. I was taught Christian values. I was taught that God doesn't make mistakes when it comes to gender. You're either a male or you're a female. And if you're a female, you're attracted to a male. If you're a male, you're attracted to a female, and that's it. And the story, there's no and, ifs, or buts. And that's what I learned. And I read to me the scripture found in Deuteronomy that says, a man should wear women's clothes and a woman should wear men's clothes, for it's abomination unto the Lord thy God. I'm thinking, oh no, I'm 10 years old. I don't know what abomination is, but it sounds like a really bad word. I better not stop. So I learned early on to suppress my identity. And at the expense of my private life, I became really good in my public or my professional career. And that's how I survived. I focused on something that I loved throughout my life in order to get me to this point. I was 40 years of age and I was still dying. Well, things started to fall apart when I was age 30. But just before then, I started praying to God. I said, God, I could read your scriptures and I can understand it, but I have no ability to feel that. And I thought, God would just kind of like bother me over the head, say, okay, you can feel things. But he doesn't do things that way. You have to go through challenges to figure out life. And 2 years later, we had Caitlin, my biological daughter, which you see up on the screen here. One of my favorite pictures is this picture right here. It's Christmas Eve, 1999. It's one of the few times that she actually opened up her eyes, and it was our opportunity where we could bond, and I'm giving her a bath. It was a moment that her and I could just really enjoy each other for a moment. I call her my little angel, and she literally changed my life. Because after Caitlin, I began to question everything I was learned in school, what I learned from my home about gender. I started researching this. God allows my daughter to be born without a brain. How could I be born with a brain that doesn't identify with my body? And I would spend the next 10 years of my life studying this subject, researching it, corresponding with doctors, scientists, psychologists from around the world, trying to figure out what is this that I am suffering from? Because growing up in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have the research, we didn't have the data, we didn't have any of that information. Psychological profiles just put us in a psychologically unfit category. They had nowhere to put us because nobody studied us. And so the world just looked at us as a bunch of psychological misfits. But I wanted to know the truth. And so I would spend the next 10 years researching this subject after losing my daughter, Caitlin. From the website looking in, you would have thought I had it all. In 2008, when things really began to fall apart. And in 2009, my wife began to ask me, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? And it was July 27th, I'll never forget it. It was a Monday, and I didn't want to tell her because I knew if I did, life as we knew it would change forever. As Christians, we were taught that one, I grew up in a Baptist state, so we didn't drink, we didn't smoke, we didn't do drugs, we didn't have sex before marriage. I could list all the things we couldn't do. And so after marriage, like things aren't working, and I just fell into depression. It's like I just further and further. It's 14 years of marriage, and I just felt like this wall that was building inside around me. I didn't allow anybody in. Not my spouse, not my children, not my church, not my friends, not my coworkers. My wall was so thick, it made the border wall look like a picket fence. And I didn't have the ability to engage. I didn't have the ability to share because I was taught that God does not make mistakes when it comes to gender, but yet down deep inside I'm suffering. The date, July 27, 2009, we're sitting on the bed and my wife keeps asking, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Nothing, nothing, nothing. She kept pressing me until she finally said, you know, an affair, aren't you? I already knew that. It's kind of funny to think about it because I didn't have one woman, let alone two. And I couldn't change that mindset that, no, I'm not having an affair. I'm suffering from something that most people won't even understand, let alone the church or you. And it's like, I just kept saying nothing. And she finally goes, no, you're having an affair. And that's when I felt like, hey, this is the time. This is the moment. This is one of those decisive moments that life, destiny, as I knew it, was about to change. On the other side of my room was a briefcase, and I went over to the briefcase, I picked it up, I brought the book to me, and began to open it up. I showed her the picture of a brain, how a brain works. You see, what we've learned through science that initially the anatomy begins to form around the first trimester. Around the second trimester is when there's a hormonal wash that goes into the brain and creates the neurological connections for the testosterone to basically to take effect as you begin to reach puberty. Well, for those of us that are transgender, we never get that testosterone wash going to the brain. We get something that's called basically a high dosage of estrogen that never allows that brain to completely form the way that it should. So I try to bring it from a scientific standpoint to show her exactly what I'm dealing with. Well, as you can imagine, this was a challenge. This ruined her world. For the man that she thought she had married for 14 years and now saying, I'm a woman. And it was very difficult for her. And I felt awful for her. I would wish this upon anybody to go through this type of scenario. Our church got involved slightly thereafter, and men in the church called me out and said, hey, what's wrong with you? And I began to share with them and said, oh, no, this is sin. You just need to pray this away. You need to go to the altar. You need to get in a men's group. We'll monitor your computer activity. We'll give you Bible verses to read, but we will help restore you to man. I said, no, I've been through this process before. I have been to the altar many times. I have prayed this away. I have been through scripture. I could quote scripture in and out, but there is no way that I can change. And they said, well, if you either do it this way or you're going to lose everything. And so they use this analogy called love must be tough. Basically, you push everybody away from this person. You allow this person the freedom to be who they want to be, but then they realize what they're about to lose, and then they'll come back to you and you can restore them back to whatever the help that they need. I couldn't do that. I had to find the truth about what I was dealing with. I've been seeing a psychologist in Australia for almost 2 years, and I have been diagnosed with severe gender dysphoria, but I did not act on it. I didn't know how to deal with it. And so I agreed to go see a Christian psychologist here in Louisville. Because as pilots, we learn to take in all this information and make a decision and go forward. And so I agreed to go see a Christian psychologist, and I was fearful. I didn't know what to expect. Was he going to say the same thing that my church friends said, or is he going to tell me something different? So I began to share with him all my story, what I was dealing with, what I was suffering from, where I was coming from. And he looks at me and he goes, what you have is biological. I said, really? He goes, no, it's not psychological, it's biological. I said, whoa, you're a Christian? And he kind of laughed a little bit. He said, yes. I said, Southern Baptist. And he chuckled and he pointed behind his chair. His office is right in front of Southern Theological Seminary. He pointed back there and says, I went to college here. I said, wow, I don't get it, because I've just been told I'm in sin, I'm going to hell, I need to pray this away, I need to believe before Christ. You're telling me this is biological? He says, I'm a doctor, they are not. He then goes on and asks me another diagnostic question. He says, you're 40 years of age, you're looking back in your life, what do you see? And I said, well, it's nothing but misery. He said, okay, looking forward. what do you see? I can't see them going forward. And it wasn't that I was suicidal or anything at that point. But when you're dealing with brain trauma, you're dealing with something every day, day in, day out, 24/7, 365 for nearly 40 years of your life. All I could focus on is what I'm doing right this very second, let alone what I'm gonna do in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 2 years, 10 years, 30 years. And he looks at me and says, I think you know what you gotta do, but you're afraid of doing it, aren't you? I said, uh-huh. And he says, let me put it this way. You got one life. One life. You wasted that first 40 years working for other people. What are you gonna do the next 40 years? And I began to think about that. What am I gonna do? Can I really sustain this? Can I continue to live as this person that I don't identify with and walk out that door every day playing a part that I don't relate with? I said, I know I can't. I can't do this anymore. I am struggling with this. I said, why is it I'm struggling so much now? I said, your brain is like a muscle. The older you get, the more difficult the challenges become. And the only way you can deal with it is to take it up front. It's hard. It really is. The idea of changing from one gender to the other, I think it's not for the faint of heart. Everything you do, you gotta learn. You gotta learn how to put on your makeup, how to do your hair, how to walk, how to dress. You have to learn how to walk out the door and be proud of yourself every day. I remember the first time walking into my company at UPS. We have a big room like this, probably over 200 pilots, and in the aviation field, 94% of the pilots are men. So there's roughly 6% are women, it's a very small minority. So I'm about to walk through that door for the first time as a woman. Scared out of my mind, I'm pumping really hard. And I was like, okay, deep breath. Deep breath. Head up, shoulder back, walk into a big smile on my face. I'm gonna own this moment. The one saving grace that I had out of all of this, my company, UPS, they stood behind me 100%. Where I was told from others that I would never be successful, I would never go anywhere in this world if I were to transition, my company stood by me. My supervisor, I remember walking into his office one time, and I was about to share with him my story about what I'm dealing with, what I'm about to do. Okay, so he's a man, he sees me as a man, I'm in a male-dominated field, and I'm about to tell him I'm a woman. I challenge anybody who thinks this is a choice to go try that sometime, and I guarantee you, it's not a choice. And I went in there and he stopped me and he said, you know what? Don't worry about it. I'm here for you. Can I tell you what those 5 words meant to me? I am here for you. When the rest of the world came crashing down, I had nothing. I had no home. I had no finances. I was barely could see my children. And I had one company man at my company say, I am here for you. That meant the world to me. And because of that man, because of the belief of the men and women in my company that stood by me, that's why I'm here today. And I can't thank them enough for what they've done. And if you're in a supervisor row and somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'm dealing with this issue, hear them out, because they're really struggling with this issue. And the one thing that I've learned through this process is once you're able to deal with issues like this, you're able to get back not only at 80%, 90%, but at 110%. And that's one of the things my company asked me to do something, I would jump because they took care of me. They stood by me throughout this process. And today I get to fly their largest airplane. We started picking these up roughly 4 years ago. It's a 747-8. It weighs 987,000 pounds. It's 250 feet long by 224 feet. It's the largest airplane in our fleet, and pretty much in comparison to other cargo fleets, there's not much left. The Antonovs, the Russians, they got a couple of them. But in the United States, this is the largest airplane. We travel at close to 700 miles per hour. I'm carrying close to 300,000 pounds of cargo, and I'm going halfway around the world with it. To have that responsibility and to be the captain of leading the crew to do something like this is probably the greatest joy. Every time I get off this airplane, I gotta look up at that cockpit and think, you know what? I just flew this thing halfway around the world. And it's probably been one of the greatest gifts in my life. If I would have never dealt with my issue, I would never not be here doing what I love, flying as a captain on a 747 all over the world. And it's been a great joy this last year through the pandemic to be on the leading edge, the cutting edge of the supply chain here to the United States. Because never did I realize how important that would become until this last year. And when we needed PPEs, vaccines and stuff like that, to be on that edge, to be a part of this team, to lead this effort, it's been a huge, huge honor for all of us here at UPS. And to know that I had a part in the role in it, it's been just a joy in my heart. If I did not transition, I would not have had the opportunity to do what I love. One of them was mentoring young girls in the cockpit, telling them, you know, encouraging them that they too can fly. If I can fly as a captain, so can they. Having dinner with my CEO of a company that worked almost 500,000 employees, flying 747 and doing a TED Talk, a live TED Talk was something I never thought I would do in my life. Or to hang out with my friends in Sydney, Australia, or to raise my two beautiful daughters who I adopted from China. And, you know, people always said that I've never become anything if I were to transition. And to have a following on Twitter, 30,000 people, has been a huge honor just to share with them my aviation stories about what I do and challenges we face overseas and stuff like that. One of the last year was even featured in CNN. As I begin to close, I started to think about how do I want to close this story? How does it affect you? Because it's always great to tell stories, but how does it affect you? I was in Agra, India, about 2 years ago, just before the pandemic, and that's my Lady Diana pose. I don't know if you remember that. she had a chance to sit in that bench right there. I thought, wow, what an honor to sit there. But the Indian government gave her clear skies. I had kind of cloudy skies, and it was kind of dreary, and there's people behind me. She didn't have any people there. But it was such a cool thing to look at that Taj Mahal. It was built in the 1600s. It took 16 years to build. And the emperor built it for one of his 4 wives. I think it was one of his 4 wives. She had 14 births, and on her 14th birth, she passed away. And so he commissioned this group to put together the Taj Mahal. This marble comes from 400 kilometers all around the world, around India, and had to move it by elephant. You know, you think about it, 1600s. That's a lot of work to move all that marble. Well, what really caught my eye was this mosaic, and it's all around the Taj Mahal. And I was looking at the mosaic, and I was studying it for a little bit. You know, somebody had to carve out all that stone. And then there's precious gems that have to be placed and cut in that specific area to fit that, creating this beautiful mosaic. That's kind of like us, it's the human race. You know, it takes every one of us, our culture, our gender, our sexuality, whether we're black or we're white, it takes all of us to create this beautiful mosaic. But when you start taking out pieces of that gems, you take away from that mosaic. And one of the things that I had to learn throughout this whole journey of my life is that I could not be part of that mosaic because I'm so focused on being somebody that I wasn't. And I go around and encourage other people to live their life, live their true selves, because you only have one life. And like, I love this quote from Jimmy Carter. It says, I have one life and one chance to make it count for something. My faith demands it that I do whatever I am, wherever, whenever I can, for as long as I can, with whatever I have to try to make a difference. As I close here today, I have this question that I ask everyone. It's like, and then my counselor asked me, he said, look at your life, looking back in your life, what do you see? Is it good, is it bad, is there something you need to change? If not, move forward. Any changes that need to be made, because you know, each one of us only has that gift of one life. We only have the ability to write our own story, but too many times we allow other people to write our story. And if I could encourage anyone here today, you be the author of your story. Thank you. Okay. Sure. You're probably not.
Thank you. That was very powerful.
Thank you.
And great. So a couple of questions. First, talk about the documentary. If
if you can. I don't know how much you can say about it.
Okay.
Who's doing it, and why do they approach you? What is that story going to be?
The story is this, too many times society passes out as psychological biscuits. You know, last year, over 75 legislative bills took place here in the United States, trying to prevent transgender people from living authentically. It may be going into a bathroom, it may be children who are trying to transition. You know, they're preventing parents from seeking the medical help of these children when it's so appropriate for them to do so. And so having the golden pulpit of flying as I do, I go through tons of medical testing, psychological testing to do what I do. I feel that I have the opportunity to go and share my story and show that we're not psychologically unfit. We know we are. Once we deal with these issues, look at what we can accomplish. We have the ability to raise my 2 kids, or get the chance to fly this and to have TED Talk. So, you know, I wanted the world to see that we're just normal people. You know, you deal with issues, you move forward, but unfortunately in society, we too many times look at people like us and say, oh no, they're misfits. And I want them to see we're just normal people. So anyways, Darren approached me a couple of years ago and said, you have a story and we want to get that story out. So they've been working with it through, unfortunately with COVID, it's kind of delayed us a little bit, but to share the story about my life, my children, what it's like growing up in my home, and what it's like working in a profession like yes, you know, and how they supported me throughout this journey. So hopefully we can show the world that we're just normal people that had a medical issue, dealt with it, moving forward.
A documentary about a feature film, you know, when.
Not gonna know.
Okay.
Well, there'll be more filming done in January. And COVID restrictions.
Well, yeah, it's messed up everything. It must have been a lonely place for you for a very long time. It was. Curious, how many of you have anyone in your family that has gender dysphoria? Yeah, so when, you know, for our generation and our culture, the topic is difficult to address and to talk about. And many times we may say and do things unconsciously that are offensive. First of all, how do we handle that? And how do you handle that?
I have a pretty broad spectrum when it comes to handling it. So long as people are trying, that's all I can ask. I know it's challenging, and I know it's challenging for my parents to set me up first, and I just had to give it time. And same thing, you know, as a transgender person, I felt if I was going to transition, I couldn't just do it at 80%, 90%. I had to do it at 110%. I just had to go overboard and really prove myself to the world that I'm just a normal person, if you will. But when it comes to people, when it comes to not understanding the issue, I've had some people that treat me pretty badly, but one of the things I've learned is that, you know, it's, what's that Bible verse that says you're reaping coals on their head when you treat them with kindness? And so I shower them with kindness and blessings, because in the end, you know, I can't change their mind. I'm not going to change their mind, but what I can do is earn the respect of others.
I was listening to a radio program this morning, and they were talking about first crushes. And the host, a female, said she was in elementary school, she had this crush on this fellow student with a kind of a bold cut, very athletic, and just, you know, there were exchange cards, etc. The next grade, she found that they were in the same room, just sitting in the chair, and the teacher's calling out this person's name. And her name was Patty. She didn't realize that this person was a little girl. She thought it was a little boy. But it didn't change her body. This is, I'm guessing, about 20 or 30 years ago. So your point that this is biological, it's innate, is very interesting. That, you know, you, at a young age, as you said, there are no kind of restrictions or putting people in boxes. It's kind of an ancient innocence.
It is. You know, as children, we know who we are early on. And we found the success rate for children who transition before puberty is very, very high. And I think, you know, people think, oh, these children are going to wake up one day, have a epiphany, and walk in, you know, start taking hormones. No, this takes a long time. First of all, they're going to work with a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And over time, they're gonna model, what is it like to, live in that specific gender? They're gonna go to class, in a specific gender for a period of time, do they assimilate over a period of time, for be monitored throughout this whole process. It isn't until the earlier you do it, the better off it is, because then it has time to deal with puberty. As you reach puberty, then the decision has to be made to run puberty blockers or not. And by that point in time, if they've proven themselves for 4 or 5 years, if this is a specific gender to go to, then they can do the puberty blockers and then later on do the hormones as you go. And so I find it's very important that, children have this opportunity to figure out who they are before puberty, because when you get puberty, things change everything. Your vocal cords, your brow, your Adam's apple, muscular structure, everything changes about you, but you, a lot of times physically, do not change after you've gone through puberty. So that's why I'm a big proponent of dealing with this issue before puberty, and that's why I think what I do.
Puberty blocker. So let's talk about that. Had it been available for you, would you have done it?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Do you guys know what we're talking about? Okay, puberty blocking is when physicians decide whether the child is approaching the age of puberty to either withhold hormones or give them
Lots
hormones,
of hormones.
block the hormones that help them continue to develop as girls or boys in puberty. It's very controversial.
It's
very controversial, because the thought is that at that age, a child is way too young to know that they are going to be a different gender for life. And puberty blocking is a biological and physical change in the body.
It is.
But the benefits are what?
They're huge, and the best way I can describe it, if you all have an Atom or you have a Apple computer versus a PC computer. Okay, so when it comes to a transgender person, our brain never developed the receptors for the gender that we are born. So what happens as puberty begins? So my body started secreting testosterone, goes into the brain, but the brain doesn't receive it. It doesn't know how to receive it, so it makes it a very foggy, very difficult challenge. The best way I can describe it, if you ever, back in the 70s and 80s, remember those station radios, we had those radio stations, you turn it on a little bit, AM, and you turn it a little bit, get static, you get more static. Well, that's the way our brains are, is that we can hear things, we can see things, we can focus on things, but we have to focus on static, because our brains do not digest the hormones that we're receiving. That blocker is a huge thing for us, because it allows us to keep that hormone from getting into our brain, and then later on, when we do decide to go in, specific gender, that hormone that we do receive, it's like spiritual food. It's like finally I can receive what I need to, and I call it peak nirvana for me. It's like it's just the greatest gift ever. Where I'm finally getting the information going in my brain that I needed. And the best I can describe is between an apple and a PC. If I pull a disc out of a PC and I put it in an apple, it doesn't read it. Vice versa, if I pull a PC and back into an apple, it doesn't receive it. That same thing goes for our brains. Our brains are designed to receive a certain type of hormone. But if we introduce certain type of hormones in the birth process when the brain is fetably developing, it prevents it from ever developing the way that it should. During my era, from 1938 to 1971, the number one drug given to mothers was dilethylstilbestrol, DES. DES was an estrogenic drug given to mothers to prevent miscarriage. A lot of people that had DES had gender dysphoria. They also had other birth defects as well. Today, what we do is we feed a lot of our food supply with heavy doses of estrogen, whether it be our food, our milk, whether it be our beef, our chickens, we feed it with a bunch of estrogen. You add all that into the birth, the processing of, to the fetal brain development, that affects how your brain will develop.
You appear to be a woman of great faith.
Yes.
How do you identify with that?
Oh, that's easy. When I was going through this, I said, God, I don't understand. Why is my church tearing me apart? Why are my friends isolating me? And it's not like somebody just knocked me over the head and said, this. But if something came to my head that day, said, remember the cross. I thought about that. Who put Jesus on the cross? It wasn't the Romans. It was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. It was the religious people who concocted a story about Jesus. He came to the Roman Caesar and said, here, we found this man in sin, and they basically wanted to stone him and kill him. And I thought, you know what? If there's anybody that can understand my pain, my hurt, it's my Jesus.
That's very hard. All right, questions from Terry? Any questions from Terry? Yes. Introduce yourself first, Tom.
Kelly, thank you. I'm Tom Olnert.
Hi, Tom.
And I'm just really curious, you know, sometimes I'm really proud that we live in the 21st century. Other times I really believe we live in the 17th century. And, you know, there's been, if we use the term LGBT, there's been a lot of progress with regard to L and G, but the B and T are just not understood by the majority of the public. And it's hurtful. I wonder if you could comment on that.
Oh, it's very hurtful. You know, they really didn't start studying our brains until 1994, when another one's brain institute started dissecting people who were transgender to understand how was our brains different from the brain, you know, of the gender that we were born into. And unfortunately, we live in a world that, you know, where we become the scapegoat, where we become the target from many organizations. You know, it used to be, they used to argue over gay marriage, constantly over gay marriage. Well, I've learned a lot is that for these organizations to exist, you got to have something to fight for. And once they lost the battle for gay marriage, who's the next target? Well, we just became the easy target because, you know, some of us may not look the part, we may not play the part, we may not act the part. So let's just really bastardize us in the public. And unfortunately, most people who never really study this subject just gravitate to that. So it takes people like myself and Erica, you know, who are professionals in our field, doing what we do, to stand up and show the world that we're just normal people, that we've dealt with an issue, we move forward, and look what we've been able to accomplish.
I saw the picture of your two beautiful girls. Can you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yes, we started the adoption process in 1999, before my biological daughter Caitlin was born. We weren't able to conceive a child, and so we started this adoption process. And 6 months into it, we found out my wife was pregnant. So I was like, okay, now what? You know, do we continue the adoption process or do we stop it? And we decided we would continue the adoption process. Thank God we did. Little did we know that Caitlin would be born with a congenital brain malformation, and we would have to deal with this and realize that, you know, at some point in time she was going to leave our arms into our Heavenly Father's. And so we kept the adoption process going, and you know, back to that verse I shared with you. Sometimes I don't understand why things are happening to us, but now looking back, I'm so glad we did, because, you know, if it wasn't for Caitlin, I wouldn't have been able to adopt my oldest daughter, Carissa. We would have been a completely different child. You know, if God had a specific plan, a specific time for this child, who was born in China, given to a mother, who had to give up this child, we just happened to put our paperwork in at a specific time. And the government here in the US sent it over to their government over there and married together, and boom, there's our child. You know, it's like, I am so thankful that I had the opportunity to raise this young girl who is now working on her global studies degree at American University. So that's been a gift. And it's like, you know, after we did the first adoption, it's like, you know what? There's so many children in this world that need homes. Why try another biological child? Maybe have a risk of losing another one. Let's go adopt another one. So we adopted my other daughter, Elizabeth. She's now graduated. She's going a pre-vet program at Murray State University. You know, it was a challenge for a period of time when I transitioned because the courts did not look favorable towards me. They made it very difficult for me to see my children. And finally, after 2 years of going through the court systems and getting court-appointed psychologists to look at this whole thing, realizing, you know what, kids need to know the truth, because the mindset before was like, oh, you're transgender, good, we'll just move the children out of your life completely. My children had no idea why I was removed from their life. We were so close together, all of a sudden, boom, daddy's gone. And they didn't know why. Finally, $90-some thousand, the court said, okay, you know, we need to let these children know the truth. And so we worked with a psychologist, shared the story with my children. We slowly integrated them. And I remember the first time I walked in the room with them, I was scared. It's like, what are they gonna do? You know, are they gonna say something or do something? They're watching cartoons. They're 6 and 9 years of age at the time. They look at me and they go right back to the cartoons. And that was pretty much it. You know, they could care less who I look like, what I look like, as long as I'm there and I care for them. And because of that, one of the greatest gifts to my relationship with my two daughters is my kids had to see me go through a very difficult, challenging time. They also saw that I fought for them to the point that I went bankrupt. And so because of that, their love for our love together is very, very close and very.
Okay, so tell us about when can we see the documentary? Do you have any, I'd love to keep.
That's a great question because it should have been done earlier, but the best COVID.
Yeah.
The problem is with the restrictions of governments, they're not allowed to film filming, so we're trying to find a film person in the US to do that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
I'll keep you posted, hopefully sometime next year.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for having me, sharing with me. Yes, okay.
That was awesome, guys. One more round of applause. Please note the big board over here, Rotarian names. These are Rotarians who've been MIA for a bit. If you haven't already done so, please grab a name and number and give them a call and tell them that it's been missed and to please join us again at Rotary. Now, I would like to invite Jay Mallory, Executive Vice President of Marketing and Business Development, Image Trust, and Chair of the Membership Development Committee to the podium for today's announcements.
Thank you, President Jean. So let's go. We got a lot of announcements. Saturday, September 25th at 9:30 a.m. is the day for the service project at 9th and Main to give the local landmark a quick wash and wipe down. There'll be a 600-gallon water truck and all the cleaning supplies will be provided, which is in you. The link to register is in your Sparks newsletter, and you can go to the event registration tab on our website at louisvillerotary.org. And at 12 noon that day, September 25th, make plans to join other Rotarians for an ice cream social. Kevin Fields has provided a party location at the Louisville Central Community Center at 1300 West Muhammad Ali. Cost is $1,300 per person. It's pretty good. I don't know if it's really good or you get a lot of ice cream. The cost is $13 per person. You can register via the link in your Sparks newsletter or through our website at the event registration tab. Make plans to join Rotarians and others at the Great Steamboat Launch Ceremony on Monday, September 27th. President Jean will open the celebration ceremony, followed by District Governor Gail Story, Secretary of Tourism Mike Berry, along with Ward Wilson, Kentucky Waterways, and Sean Burks, President Chief Operating Officer of the American Queen Steamboat Company, to provide proclamations and acknowledgements as we kick off this effort to promote the goal of saving our rivers. And there'll be live music provided by the Studio Code 502 band. So there we go. Next week's meeting, we are September 23rd. And our guest speaker will be District Governor Gail Story, President and CEO of the Queen American Steamboats, Sean Burks, and Kentucky Waterways Alliance Executive Director Ward Wilson, who will be a Rotary Riverside chat celebrating the project of saving our rivers. Rotary Golf Day is back, and we have golfers in the room. So the new lower price and better format, make your plans for October 11th, Columbus Day, at the Glen Oaks Country Club for a total of $50. You receive a buffet lunch that includes one drink and a round of golf with cart. Prizes will be awarded for male and female divisions for longest drive, longest putt, closest to the pin, and a few, I guess it's frog surprises. I don't know what a frog surprise is, but sounds like fun, so come on out. You can sign up individually, pairs, threesomes, or foursomes. Registration requires a $15 deposit before October the 4th. Contact the Rotary office at 589-1800. Or send an email to rotary@rotary45.org. Very special Kentucky Honor Flight is scheduled for October the 20th. This is the first and perhaps only 2021 honor flight for Kentucky and Southern Indiana area veterans of World War II, Korean and Vietnam. Please make plans to volunteer to assist this special group and their families before or after the trip to Washington, D.C. to visit various war memorials and the Arlington Cemetery, which also includes lunch and meetings with several elected officials. They will return to Louisville later that day between 9 and 10 p.m. Will be Memorial Day for these veterans, and I hope you plan to join the crowd and cheer and greet them upon return. Every veteran deserves our gratitude and thanks for their service, and your presence there will mean a lot to them. We appreciate you registering your meeting attendance a week in advance. Please use the link provided in the RSVP email that you received, or scan the QR code that's at your table before you leave today. Please note that reservations close at 4 p.m. tomorrow. This is the deadline the restaurant requires, so please respond with your intentions by tomorrow. The meeting is also available via Zoom. And now time to wish some happy birthdays. Brett Corbin, September 16th. Maggie Harlow, September 16th. Devon Holt, September the 17th. Ann Linnell, September the 19th. Nancy Jo Trapton, September the 20th. Felicia Dowdy, September 21st. Back to you, President Gene.
Thank you, Jay. And happy- All right, how many of you have ever seen an angel? No. Well, did you know that we have an angel among us? And she comes in the form of Debbie Skidmore. Debbie's last meeting is today. Debbie, come out here. Back in like 2012 or whatever, when I was a perennial guest of Randy Code, going to the Rotary meetings at the golf house, this beautiful, lovely woman would greet me at every meeting. And she would just be so elegant and classy. And one day she said, "You don't need to join." She says, "Well, you can be on the committee, and then be chair, and then be on the board, and one day be president." And I thought, well, that's a stretch, but she's so sweet. She is the reason that I joined Rotary in 2014. She is it. Right, Ron?
Well, as y'all can see, she's a natural. It was obvious.
Did you bring a pickup truck? Because you got a lot of stuff to take with you. Now this gentleman, Fred Braun, is he calls himself Hopalong, Fred. Was the person who got her to rescue us when we had a transition in our front office, and she did not hesitate. I mean, she jumped right in, just like she'd been there the day before, and we're so grateful for her service. All right, great.
Okay, so if anybody has been a past president or even a long-term member of the club, you know, this is the toughest job. You've got to juggle 15 balls, run a meeting, deal with a president, a board, 350 some odd egotistical members, and with a smile on your face every week. And so when I reached out to her a couple weeks ago, I'm thinking to myself, gosh, I hope she gets on this crazy town ride to Cuckooville. And of course, she did. And so from all of us, for me, from all presidents, everybody, thank you so much for saving us. And with a smile on her face, we've got flowers and we have a bunch of cards and baskets. And can we get a little round of applause from everybody?
Well, I'm not prepared to say a word, but of course, there was no hesitation because I love every single Rotarian. And your family, you're totally family. And so I would do anything to help you all. And no, I'm sure you can only retire 2 times, you know. But don't tempt me. Anyway, I'm already best friends with your next interim director, and so I will be here subliminally helping all that I can, and I'm sure it'll just get better and better and better. So, love you.
We'll see around for photographs with you all. Come on, for Pete's sake. Thank you all. Do good things and have fun doing them. This meeting is adjourned.
Good seeing you.
Just in time. Get all these presents, all this.